Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to the Mel Blackwell Experience on this January 11th, the year of our Lord, 2026. Can you believe it? I remember being young and being like, man, when, by the year 2000, I'll be over 30 years old, and thinking that was a big deal. And so now we're a little bit older, huh? But got a great show today. I want to get started with this. I think this will set the stage for a new year, 2026, and some really great best practices and a good one, a really good one. But let's take off with this.
If you were to die tonight and you were getting entry into heaven, what would you say? If you answer that, and if I answer it in the first person, we've immediately gone wrong. Because I believed, because I have faith, because I am this, because I am continuing. Loved ones, the only proper answer is in the third person, because he. Think about the thief on the cross. And what an immense... I can't wait to find that fellow one day to ask him, how did that shake out for you? Because you were cussing the guy out with your friend. You've never been in a Bible study. You never got baptized. You didn't know a thing about church membership, and yet you made it. You made it. How did you make it? That's what the angel must have said. Like, what are you doing here? Well, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Well, because I don't know. Well, excuse me, let me get my supervisor. They go get the supervisor ranger. So, just a few questions for you. First of all, are you clear on the doctrine of justification by faith? The guy said, I never heard of it in my life. And what about, let's just go to the doctrine of Scripture immediately. This guy's just staring. And eventually in frustration, he says, on what basis are you here? And he said, the man on the middle cross said, I can come. Now, that is the only answer.
Wow. Is that good or what? I know that's been around for a while. And I know many of you have seen it, but it's just fantastic. And so being the first podcast of the new year, we will focus a little bit on the New Year's resolution mindset that we all have. It's a great thing because it is self-improvement. It is a reflection, inner reflection of the self to say, how can I be better? What can I do to be a more successful or a better person or accomplish the goals or put aside some things that have held me back in the past, and what can I do to be better? So let's focus on that as a business best practice, which I believe is at the core of business improvement. I believe that many times in business, what we're trying to do is improve metrics. We look out there and we say, we set our goals. And obviously goals are great because they come down to a number. And there's a methodology out there that's very sound that says everybody should have at least one number in business that goes along like feathers that make the wing of the business so that everybody is working towards the same goal. So everybody has a number or two or three or four. And so all of that is healthy and positive. What really is the core of floating all boats in your business is your business culture. And I believe that that's the biggest bang for the buck, that many times we look down into the business and we say, we want to have more revenue. We want to have better customer service. We want to have these different things. And all of those are noble goals. And those are very good rocks in the EOS world goals. And you put time frames on them. You hold people accountable. You set to-dos and manageable bites. You do the dot-to-dot zigzag that I teach. Your biggest bang for your buck to increase all metrics in an almost immeasurably positive way is culture. The reason why is because there are several analogies. One analogy is your culture is the aquarium that your entire business, in which your business lives. And so optimal conditions in that aquarium in an almost immeasurable way can increase the quality of life for everything that's in the aquarium. That is your culture. Another way to look at your culture, when I talk about the rattlesnake or the king cobra in the baby crib, we've talked about that the baby crib is your culture. It's that thing your business lives in. The business is the baby. And then anything that is hurtful, damaging to, particularly if it's people, a rattlesnake, a culture bandit, somebody that's on the other side of the rope could be very hurtful. You may not feel it, but the baby does. Your people do. That culture, that crib is your culture. So you can imagine if you really wanted to find out what's the one thing that if I could improve this year that would give me the most resounding results across the board, it's your culture. And so my book, Uncommon Sense, which should be out here in the next month or two, How to Fix Your Workplace Culture in the Wild West of Business, Uncommon Sense. It focuses on those almost mystical type things that I did from time to time throughout my entire career, 35 years of not always knowing what to do, but I did something. And when I was writing this book, I had to really be intra-reflective. I had to really reflect internally because I'll be honest, I didn't know why I did what I did. And sometimes I don't even remember that I did it. I had to go back and sit and say, how did I work? When I was confronted with this scenario, what did I do? Almost always I went to culture. It was what I did. Because it's the biggest, it's grabbing every lever in the business at the same time and improving them. And the way you improve it, honestly, y'all, the way you improve it is one person at a time. And so I have trademarked something called the Best Pledge. And the Best Pledge was something that I used a lot early in my business, but I didn't know I was using it. Later on, as I became kind of reflective, it's like, what did I do? How did I do that? And I was tying these themes together. The Best Pledge is one of the most powerful things that I ever executed. You can read about it, whatever, but if you execute it, it is massively powerful in transforming a culture positively. I've mentioned it many times in my podcast, but the Best Pledge is pretty simple. It's first starting to talk to each other about we need to do the best work of our career together right here, right now, in our roles. I'm in the right role. You're in the right role. I'm the right person for my role. You're the right person for your role. We've been thoughtful. We've taken care of things. These are all culture drivers. Taking care of things is a culture driver. These are ways to capture the hearts and minds of people for good. And that's what we're going to talk about today on the podcast. How do you capture the hearts and minds of your people for good? And what I mean by good is good is good is good. So good people trying to do good things will give you good results if they're the right person in the right seat. So nowhere in anything that we talk about is mediocrity acceptable. If you want to accept it, that's okay, but you will get a mediocre result. So in the world of best practice, you start hitting your goal. You start doing your job at goal. And so these are all things that when I sat to think about it, it was driving the culture. People spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars trying to get improvements in their business, trying to get a division to do better, trying to get a startup to get going off the ground and hit the goals, trying to turn around something, trying to purchase a business and try to make the old brand your brand, to transition that to your business, to replace everything that was the DNA of the old brand. It's got to be 100% your DNA. So in business, we try to do these things, but the most powerful thing you can do in any scenario is make your culture resoundingly improved. And the best way to do that is with best practice. And the best way to do best practice is, I've said it, and it is a very powerful thing. And sometimes you should just write it down on a piece of paper and ponder on it for an entire day. It's illogical that people being their worst self or their worst collective selves will be able to implement best practice in your business. And so, oh yeah, of course, Mel. Okay, well then what you going to do about it? Because most people are like, well, I don't know, I just tell them I'm not going to pay you, I'll fire them or whatever. It's like, no, you have to inspire people into their best self. And that's what so much of life is. There's people that have written, we're going to study C.S. Lewis a little bit today. We're going to look at C.S. Lewis a little bit today after we finish the business segment, and it'll dovetail beautifully with this. But people, God, Christianity, Judaism, and many other Eastern religions that aren't Christian, or that I would say they're not even worshiping the same God, but there has been a core fabric of decency, of improvement, of that doing certain things with certain ethics, with certain character, is a superior existence. It is superior way of living. Okay, and in the result, the self, what's in it for me, will be a more fulfilled self. And in many instances, many cultures, whether it's Native American culture, whatever, work ethic, doing certain things will get you better results. That was just part of the betterment of mankind, right? And so in business, I believe focusing on the self, and the first self to focus on is myself. And then we start talking about yourself. And then we get the self to selves, selves to team, and team to teams dynamic going. And it really does build. And so what I was going to say is you can't get a team, it's illogical to have any kind of a successful, effective, executable, best practice going on in your business with individuals being their worst selves, particularly if they're key. In business, there are just some truths. Some people are more key to your success than others, particularly those that are put in positions of leverage. So if I am one of your C-level people under me in a well-run company where I'm not going to do your job, you're going to do your job, and you're going to make sure everybody does their job. So if I'm the CEO and let's say you're the senior vice president of sales, well, you're one person I touch, but under you, on my behalf, you may have 1,000 people working for you. So to me, I've got a 1 to 1,000 single point of failure there. If you're not the right person, I lose leverage over 1,000 people. If you are the right person, I gain leverage over 1,000 people. And if we work well together, then I do my job, you do yours, and there can be a really wonderful, I can be the maestro, all the different departments, and you're one of the sections of the entire orchestra, and your section is killing it, right? Killing it. Well, in that model, that person is a single point of failure. They're very, very key. So particularly starting out, the key individuals for those of us, let's say, running a business, myself being my best self, committed to being my best, imperfect, flawed. And, I look back at my career, there's our old Art Williams saying, all you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough. And a lot of people cop out on that. Well, Art said it's all you can do. Well, if you listen to Art for 1 minute, you weren't going to get away with being a slack ass anywhere around him. And so he wasn't saying, you can be your worst self or your sorriest self. He's like, literally, honestly, when you're doing all you can do is enough. And so as we look at ourselves, I look back at my 20-year-old self, my 30-year-old self, 40-year-old. Obviously, I want to see an improvement. I want to see me getting more and more mature and more wiser and better. And I would honestly like to say I have, and I'm humbled. I'm thankful. I appreciate that God has allowed me to grow like that because I have. And it was a lot of the things I just as soon not lived through, whether I screwed them up or whether I was wronged by somebody else. Those things have matured me. They've made me wiser. The scars are some of the most important lessons I've got. And so as you're looking at your team, you look at yourself and you say, I want to be the best self I can be in 2026. What does that mean for me? And don't lie to yourself. One of the most important best practices that you can implement today is do not lie to yourself. Do not cover for yourself and lie to yourself. It's what happens when you lie to somebody else and they believe you, you start to believe your lie too. So somebody believing your lie is really your fault because that means you're a real good liar. You've tricked them, you've persuaded them, and it's not true. But if you do that very long, you'll actually start believing your own lies, and you'll go back and tell the story, and you'll almost have to hey, self, that's a lie. You have said it so many times, and so many people believe it, but it's just not true. And so it doesn't really do you a lot of good to kick yourself around. it more is the more powerful thing to do versus kicking yourself around versus blank. The more powerful thing to do is be honest with yourself and then move on. Move on in honesty, move on in decency, move on in I'm going to do something about that. I'm done, living in this untruthful scenario that I give myself an out. Example being, if somebody's just always late, they're probably lying to themselves somewhere in that, giving themselves an out, right? There's an excuse you don't understand, blah, blah, blah. So what goes along with most of our imperfections is some form of lying to ourselves, whether that is we lower the standard for ourselves and we give ourselves an excuse, or we just flat out lie to ourselves. And so once you're able to focus on that for yourself, go to your key people, all your direct reports, and you say, look, and you start with yourself. I am going to work on being my very best self. You don't have to sit down with somebody and rake them over the coals about everything about them that you wish was better. They'll do that to themselves the minute that they decide that they want to get better. You can kick people around as long and hard as you want to, and it's really not very effective. But when they kick themselves, this is another best practice. Reach down there, pat them on the head, and say, let's don't focus on that anymore. I can see you're committed to being your best self. Let's go. I'll help you. And people are amazed that you don't want to rub their nose in something. I only want to rub somebody's nose in it if that would help them become more effective. But I've really never been a nose rubber in business. I would like to inspire people that you go, this is pretty simple. If we're being our best selves, best practice is going to catch fire in our business. People are going to follow us more aggressively with less self-interest if we're being our very best selves. And so that's really the best practice. And so the second part of that, if you want to give, I had a gentleman that worked for me. He was really smart, one of the smartest people I've ever worked with. He was both an accountant and an attorney. He was very, very good at both. And so he worked with us at a high level. So I kind of had him as the CFO and the chief legal counsel. But as much as we enjoyed each other and we worked well together, he did not like it when I told analogies, which imagine being around me and not liking analogies. It's going to kill you. And he didn't like, the little stories I would tell and different things. And that was the way I communicated. And he would express that to me. He would just be like, Mel, I just wish you wouldn't do that. And I just look at him. I'm like, well, good luck, because that's the way I communicate. And if you haven't noticed, it resonates with other people. And over time, once he saw, because he had really never run large teams, he was the brilliant accounting strategist, even more so than a tactician, like really sharp. And he had all the legal background, so we would look at legal and financial models, and the guy was brilliant. But when it came to leading teams, they annoyed him, and my leadership of them annoyed him until he saw that it was effective. And I say that it's not about me or him there, but what it's about is sometimes when I say teach somebody something 7 times 7 ways, how you say it. It's an email. It's something you put up in the break room. It's all kind of things, right? Dashboards, it's a speech that you give. It's a social media post. But one of the ways you can work with people on being their best self, you sit down and you say, we're going to do the best work of our careers together right here, right now. And, oh, hey, look, one more thing. I want you to be your best self at home and at work. Be the best version of you. Talk about the you horse. The you horse is a really powerful way to get people to start thinking about it, because you can spend your whole life wasting the horse you're on, not learning to ride the horse you're on, blaming the horse or blaming yourself. A lot of folks have problems with themselves. And another thing that you can use is talk about the wolf you feed. It's the wolf you feed that grows stronger. So when you want to be your best self, it's also a healthy exercise to define your worst self. Right now, what are some of the behaviors of my worst self? Well, there's this, there's that. Yep, I got this too, and I got this. All right, jot those down just for you. This isn't something you make people do with each other. You know what I mean? Like, let's talk about Betty. Betty's got a bad habit of hoeing over there. I mean, you really, whatever's going on with somebody, that's personal with them. And I really don't ever get real deep into what's going on, but I talk about the betterment, what you can do, the best practices, the tools, the ways you can get better. And so the wolf you feed, if you feed that bad wolf, he will grow, and he will grow stronger, and you'll have to fight that bad wolf, and you'll be fighting a very strong, bad part of yourself. On the other hand, for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. Same thing with the best and worst self. When you define on a private, confidential, secret piece of paper, these are the things that I really think, these are the behaviors of my worst self. Okay, well, that's the bad wolf. That's the bad wolf. And you say, well, I don't want to feed that wolf. Okay, well, what are things you could do to feed that wolf? Okay, so you list those out next to it. These are short exercises, by the way. They're not, nobody wants to sit down and do this long, drawn out, painful thing. This is short. Heck, just pick the top 3. So you go through, these are the bad wolf elements, and these are the ways I feed them. And then if you'll there's the opposite and equal right there to that. Well, the good wolf's going to be doing the opposite of that and the opposite of that, and feeding the good wolf will be doing something opposite of that. There's that thing in your head, if you can't get the song out of your head, because our brains are so powerful, they'll just wear us out. You have to replace the song, with something else, with a different song. I've had to do that many times. And so I hope that's very helpful. I do think that as we get into best practice and people being their best self, so that you can create a team of selves within numerous people on the same team, to the point that every self, all the selves on that team are now focused and rowing together, trying to do their best work, trying to be the best version of themselves. And all you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough. Then it becomes teams, and then you've got a whole company do it. That is traction. That is cultural excellence. Now, when you want to roll out something like problem worship, you're not rolling it out to a bunch of people being their worst self, or some segment of your business that's got a bunch of worst selves in it, or a whole element of your company, an entire department, an entire team that is comprised of people not trying to be their best self. And so that's where best practice really becomes extraordinary. And I was asked quite a few times prior to turning something around, how do you think you're going to be able to turn this around? And listen, sometimes you fake it till you make it, because you're just like, I just believe I can. How? I don't know. I can do it. Once you've done it a few times, well, I'll try these things. They may not work this time. I mean, I've been out there before and swung the biggest stick I had, and it didn't even make a dent. But never have I been involved in transformational, best personal improvement that it didn't make a massive and fast turn. Because if people are incapable of being their individual, unique best self, they will not make that commitment. They will not get control of themselves. They will not ride their U-horse to the satisfaction of their teammates and the company. They will just not meet the standard. Then that's a bye-bye moment. That's like, look, I think you're an awesome person, but it's just not going to work here right now. We're not going to be able to give you, we're not going to fail watching you be yourself. So, adios amigos. And you replace that person with somebody out there that's praying for that job, that's willing to be their best self, that's going to come in and going to get on your side of the rope. So I'm not saying it's magic. It goes along with everything we've ever said. But if you want to see every single metric in your business rise at the same time in the affirmative, in the positive, it can be done the fastest and most sustainable way through cultural excellence. And I just think that is just a fantastic way to focus and start the new year. All right. So a kind of a subtopic, B and C on best practice. I would like to encourage a kind of a Melism for 2026 for all of you guys, that I call it hoe your row. And I think that hoe your row is a very interesting thing to say to people, because there's a lot in there. So I'm talking about like farming, where you're hoeing, you're out there, it's hard work. And, some people their row is soft and they've got the really good soil at the time. Somebody else is over on rocky soil. Somebody else is over there having to tie themselves to a tree because their slope of where they're rowing is just so steep. But I think that is something to focus with your team, along with the world of best practice, along with being your best self, the best pledge. Hoe your row. it's a conversation you have with God about where God has you right now, and realizing that you are on the row you're on, and you got to do the hoeing. And so hoe away you go, just hoe, hoe, hoe on your row. And I think that's real important. And sometimes if have spent several years getting away from God and where God wants you, you might have a really tough row. I know I've done it, and I've got, oh man, and God doesn't just go, dinky, 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 like Bewitched and just pop you back over. Sometimes you got to hoe your way back. And that's a lesson to teach people. It also goes a lot for being your best self. Being your best self is going to keep you in proximity to where God wants you, on the row he has in mind for you. And therefore you may find yourself hoeing right there in God's row. And believe me, that's where you want to be. But we're humans, and we get off. We end up off. We do something stupid. We end up down there. We look up and we go, wait, I'm off course. And the only way back, you might have to hoe your way back to God's row. And so as we go into that with the opening about the man on the middle cross told me I could come to heaven, that is just so exceedingly powerful, because that is salvation. It isn't, I did all these things and therefore I'm saved. It comes down to, well, Jesus said that he saves me, right? And obviously there's a call to Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit works with people in that calling. And, you have to accept Jesus and turn away from your worst self. You got to start feeding the Jesus wolf. And so Hoe Your Row 2026 is something you can talk to your people. It's like, okay, we're in a tough spot. We didn't have a good fourth quarter. Last 3 years have sucked. Where we are is where we are. And so now you have your destination vision of what you want to do. And then you've got your journey, the how journey, which is your your sub vision. And that's what you're selling to everybody. Your overarching vision of your company is usually very unique between companies, but your how journey, how you're going to pull it off, is not drastically different. If it's the same scenario, if you're facing the same basic economic conditions, market conditions, issues with your products, the way out is best practice. And there may be several paths that are equally as good, but they all start with being your best self and doing your best work together. And it might be that you have to look at somebody and go, dude, we got to hoe our row. This is going to be tough. So what does that mean? Hard work. No whining. Let's go. Get out there. If you're worried about blisters, put on some good work gloves. Wear some good shoes. Let's go. And I think that's powerful. The next important kind of subtopic, C, best practice. The third thing I think could be most helpful to start off a new year in business is, it's been called master the obvious, right? But one of the master the obvious things that I did one time, and I was like, wow, that really worked, was I just sat in a room with some people and I said, what if we immediately stop doing the 5 stupidest things we do in our business? Let's just identify the 5 stupidest things that we do in this business. And let's just then don't worry about how, right? Don't worry about when, but what. What are the 5 dumbest dadgum things that we're doing in this business that are hurting us the most, that we just, everybody knows it, but we keep living. It's the dog turd in the living room. We've just walked around. It's turned white and turned to dust. Don't underestimate what's stopping doing 3, 4, 5 of the dumbest things you do, the things that hurt the most, that drag the most, that are the most damaging. Then there's a reason why you haven't addressed them. So don't worry about how you're going to do it. But what if you could identify the 5 the stupidest things that are hurting you the most, that are going on right now in your business? What are they? List them. That becomes an IDS session. And those need to be resolved as close to where they exist in the business. If that is happening in your finance department, then maybe you identify it at the senior leadership table, you handle it to your CFO or your director of finance, and you say, y'all bring us back the solutions to these 5 things. Or you've got 2, sales has 1, human resources has 1, and manufacturing has 1. You push those down and you ask the solutions to come from where they live. And then you get back at the senior level and you hash these things out. Sometimes that alone can have a massive improvement. What it does for your culture is it becomes, nobody likes it when they see you as leaders not remove obstacles. They don't understand it. Now, they may learn to live with it and they may just go, we give up. They'll never fix that. And I have made some huge strides in getting cultural acceptance, getting people to sign on to do hard stuff when they see me come in and knock out the obvious things that they're like, man, nobody's ever done that. We thought nobody would ever do that. That was so obvious. The first thing I would do if I was put in charge is I would do this thing. Think about that. And, look at your culture, the best pledge, look at getting all your key people on board, get them to get their key people on board. That's traction to the ground. Worst, people being their worst self will not give you business best practice. People being their best self will naturally team together around best practice. Hoe your row in 2026 and stay in your row in 2026 and do what you have to do and do your part and do not let your people down in the rows next to you and try your best to get back on the row God wanted you on. If you got off trail, it's your fault, not his. Try to get back in God's row before the end of 2026. And then stop doing the 5 dumbest things that you do in your business. And that works in your personal life. You can just go, what are the 5 dumbest things I'm doing that hurt me the most? Well, I think I'm just going to quit doing them and have the strength of mind and character to commit to it and do it. So I think that's helpful. I hope it's helpful for you guys. But let's talk about a fascinating subject next. All right. So what we want to do now, I hope you can hang with me on this. This is going to be slightly cerebral, but I think it's a great way to start off the new year. And it's going to extend the best practice section of business, but also it extends to what's going on in our culture in the United States of America and around the world, which is also important, right? If your business exists in the aquarium of your culture, that is the culture, then your business culture exists in the larger aquarium of the country in which you live. So you cannot escape the culture of America with an American business that's predominantly operating in the United States of America. You have to care. And that's part of what we're going to talk about in C.S. Lewis's amazing book, The Abolition of Man. Okay. We're going to look at that pretty extensively, and I hope you can hang with me. If you can't, it's probably my fault, but it's really not it's not a huge, long book. But, when you read things now, almost 100 years ago, the way that people speak is a little harder to follow for us because I think we've gotten dumber. We've gotten less, the etiquette's not there. The eloquence isn't there. And I speak on these podcasts and I'm sure people go, I'm an old country boy, but when we talk about the abolition of man, there is a in the early part of the book, I think it's chapter 1, he talks about men without chests. What does that mean? So you've kind of got the head, the chest, and the stomach. And he kind of says that's really mankind, humanity. The head is the thinking part. The chest is the, the doer, and then, the protector. And then you have the stomach, which is kind of the wants, the gluttony of man can be. He goes into it, and it's fascinating. So I've got some clips I want to play, and I hope I've tried to select them and edit them where they become more interesting. But in short, you've got the importance of objective values, which he calls the Tao. It's T-A-O. And, of course, it's spelled with a D because it is. And then he talks about modern times and kind of the consequences of rejecting traditional morality, the Tao. And he compares the more modern approach, he calls it the Green Book, just kind of generically encapsulates everything that is the destruction of society. And it's kind of a propaganda thing in his mind. And then he talks about how society becomes manipulable. And it's very interesting. And so he warns that without the Tao, humans become controllable. So if you wonder why the communists, the betters of ours have taken over society, and like we said, only 3 to 5% of us have ever lived in real freedom that have ever been human beings on the earth, there are mechanisms by which people take control. Well, C.S. Lewis gets all over something very interesting. So without the Tao, which could be attributed to Eastern religions, Middle Eastern religions, Native American, Christian Judaism. There's just a core of decency in all of these different religions, and he doesn't go into, he was a staunch Christian, he really was, but he doesn't do that in this book. He just calls it the Tao. And without the Tao, people that see themselves outside or above the Tao are our conditioners. And then those that are manipulated by them are the conditioned. But let's listen to some very interesting clips here, and then we'll talk about them along the way.
The Abolition of Man is a short philosophy book by C.S. Lewis, one of the greatest Christian writers of the 20th century. The fundamentals of his philosophy are outlined in The Abolition of Man. The thesis of this book is that if we debunk and abolish traditional moral values and gain control over the conscience of man as science has enabled us to control other things in nature, it will result in the eventual abolition of man, the dehumanization of humanity. Abolish man's conscience, and you abolish man. Although Lewis is a theist and argues for theism elsewhere, he makes no attempt to argue for the existence of God or any particular religion in this book. A staunch atheist could completely agree with the abolition of man and yet remain a staunch atheist. Lewis writes of two opposing views, the world of the Green Book and the world of the Tao. The world of the Tao is a broad generalization that contains the traditional moralities of both East and West, the Buddhist, Christian, Confucian, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, and Socratic, all lumped together. Lewis refers to the sole source of all value judgments and calls it the Tao. The Tao is, he asserts, not something we can change, for it would cease to be the Tao if we did. Judgments in the world of the Tao are right or wrong, like mathematical statements. But in the world of the Green Book, all value judgments are subjective. The Green Book itself is an actual English textbook which, perhaps accidentally, teaches unwary children that all sentences containing a predicate of value are not statements about qualities inherent in their subjects, but are really unimportant statements about the speaker's own feelings. Lewis first points out that this amateur philosophy is absolutely out of place in an English textbook, regardless of its validity, and proceeds to tear the position to shreds anyway. Lewis wrote, "Until quite modern times, all teachers, and even all men, believed the universe to be such that certain emotional reactions on our part could be either congruous or incongruous to it. Believed, in fact, that objects did not merely receive, but could merit our approval or disapproval, our reverence or our contempt. The educational problem is wholly different according as you stand within or without the Tao. For those within, the task is to train in the pupil those responses which are in themselves appropriate, whether anyone is making them or not, and in making which the very nature of man consists. Those without, if they are logical, must regard all sentiments as equally non-rational, as mere mists between us and the real objects. As a result, they must either decide to remove all sentiments, as far as possible, from the pupil's mind, or else encourage some sentiments for reasons that have nothing to do with their intrinsic justness or ordinacy. The latter course involves them in the questionable process of creating in others, by suggestion or incantation, a mirage which their own reason has successfully dissipated." Lewis models the mind of man as a Platonic division of three: the head, center of intelligence; the stomach, center of desire; and the chest, center of will. He argues that removing all sentiments from the mind, as many modern so-called rationalists try to do, produces men without chests, that making value judgments are an essential part of clear thinking.
Men without chests. Is that good or what? 1942, I think, or was it 1943 that he wrote this book? What a brilliant man. And so I won't go toe-to-toe on this because we have quite a few clips, but isn't that interesting? So what do you hear in that reminds one of our times in which we live right now? Okay. What I hear is, remember we talked about Luciferianism, and Luciferianism likes to accomplish one of two things: convince you there is no God and no right and wrong. And to me, that is the dumbest thesis. Okay. I don't believe it's very intellectual. So it amazes me that intellectuals fall for that. I believe that's intellectually lazy. And I think that that's like, wow, I mean, you didn't try very hard to come up with that. On the other hand, if you have to believe that there is a God, Right. So if there's no God, there's no devil. So that's the first one. What's the biggest trick the devil played on humanity is convince them that there's no devil. There's no God. There's no devil. There's just no nothing. You live, you die. And I love that at the end of our last podcast with the reading of Mother. I thought that was really, really cool. It sticks with me. It kind of rings in my head. But Luciferianism in its more intellectual form says, yeah, there's a God. Sure, there was a falling out in heaven, but that's not the way it went. You've been told a lie. The truth is God's a bad guy. The devil's a good guy. And from there, God's the liar. He's the tyrant. He's the oppressor. He's the one that forces law and order. And so the devil creates situations where it puts law in a predicament, and then bad things happen, and then the devil blames the law, and he blames the police, the God, the authority that created some law. So why in the world do we have to do what they say? That's all over the place. That is everywhere right now. So what I want you to do on this next segment is be thinking about these 4 concepts. The conditioner, okay, that's those people that are manipulating and trying to push this green book idea that it's all relevance. It's not really real. Your emotions, your beliefs. What is God anyway? What is truth? My truth. All this my truth stuff. Dumbest thing I've ever heard. Well, I just really thought she was really awesome, how she expressed her truth. It'd be like, what in the world is her truth? There's either a truth or there's not, right? There's either a God, either God made man or man made God. So the Luciferianism plays with all that stuff, confuses people. And remember, it was said by Stefan Molyneux that most people can't think in the abstract. They can't even visualize imagery in their mind. Like I can, but a lot of folks can't, and a lot of folks are not capable of intellectual thought, like real thoughts of their own. They basically operate on other people's thoughts. And what we're dealing with here with with what we're seeing with the conditioners is language models. People live in language models now, not reason, not wisdom, language models. So all of these people showing up in Baltimore or Minneapolis or New York or California or Portland out in the street, well, a lot of them are paid actors. They're just out there. They're paid to protest and throw fits, and they just go with whatever the grievance of the day is. Well, it was Hamas we hate Jews, we hate Christians, we hate Israel, and it's like okay, well, we're done with that. Now we hate ICE, and so they're always looking for that authority to hate. And they operate in language models. They're almost impossible to reason with because they simply state and restate things eloquently. You watch that mayor up there in Minneapolis. I'm like, this guy's a complete clown. He just says with great passion. And AI is a language model. Just so you know, I believe AI will become animated with almost demonic power, and it'll move much deeper than a language model. But well-constructed facts, well-constructed things that move, the conditioners use language models to get the conditioned to do things. And it doesn't matter what's right and wrong. It's interesting. So anyway, let's listen to a further continuance on C.S. Lewis, and I think you'll find this interesting.
Most objectors to progressivism typically follow the method of assuming that progressivist policies cannot succeed in accomplishing their goals, and arguing against them by deducing what the actual results of their failure will be, on the assumption that these results would be wrong. But Lewis takes a radically different approach in discussing progressivism. He assumes, for the sake of argument, that the progressives are right about all the facts, and that all their policies will work exactly the way they are expected and intended to work, and aims to show that the world in which progressivism works and succeeds is an inhuman world. His argument is not that the ultimate progressive society is wrong, but that it is inhuman. If such a society could be wrong, that would make it more human. The problem is that it's not wrong. because it has abolished the concepts of right and wrong, and in so doing has abolished humanity. In what Lewis calls the world of the Green Book, governed by the conditioners, it wouldn't make sense to the inhabitants of that world to speak of there being a wrong, because in such a world there could be no knowledge of wrongness. Lewis is not suggesting that the conditioners will be particularly bad men, but that they won't be men at all. He is saying that their abolition of the old ideas of value for the new conditioned arbitrary values will abolish man, because man's identity and essence is rooted in the old ideas of value. We will be able to have no common ground at all with either the conditioners or the conditioned, because the very idea of common ground that our civilization is rooted in is simply the old ideas of value and nothing else.
Wow. And then you add to that AI, right? So you have this mega processing power, this ability to communicate almost instantly. You've got people asking AI, how do I feel about this? What about that? And it's pretty incredible. I mean, I use Grok every single day. It's a great research tool for me. Like a lot of the research I did on this, I did with Grok. So the core idea here, we're talking about conditioners and the conditioned, right, is that society is in danger. So when we abandon objective morals, what Lewis called Tao, universal values like honor, courage, justice, small elites gain total control, and they turn the rest of us into programmable objects. And of course, that's not freedom. Lewis calls it the abolition of man. And so then in brief, and then we'll go on to play another one, we'll go to Prager, which is another discussion with two different people that I think is fascinating on this too. But the conditioners are the elite controllers. They're a tiny group of scientists, technocrats, rulers who use tools like eugenics, psychology, education, propaganda, and they condition, which could also be, you could say, reshape human behavior in society. Okay, if you don't see that, like what the heck happened to the television and the movies that we watch? What happened to our education system? What happened to a lot of the churches that have just they don't even have salt anywhere near. They're not anywhere Bible based. They've lost it. And so you can see that, right? And then you have they're actually outside of morality. They've rejected traditional ethics, so they're just not guided by right or wrong, and they poo-poo you with right or wrong. You're just primitive, or can't believe, Mel, that you're a learned and educated man and you believe in these fairy tales, right? That's what they do, and you just have power impulses or quote unquote progress. And Lewis says that they're not men at all, but they're dehumanized, and they're stepping into a moral void, but they have a lot of power, right? So who do you think lives in the moral void? Who do you think hates mankind? Who does this sound like? Like, remember the chairs on high, you sit on high, and you can imagine way at the highest of high is the God of all. He is the most mighty and the most majestic. That's God, Jehovah, Yahweh, God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit. Under that, way down, but still way above us, is Lucifer. And he has been wreaking havoc on mankind, and he always will until God puts him away. And so what we're looking at here is very Luciferian. It's when we're talking about the abolition of man, well, that would make Lucifer happy. He wants to destroy every single person. He can't stand us. He knows it hurts God, but he also hates us. There's nothing good about the turd that is Lucifer. And so then you have their power, right, that they have, and you say, well, where are they getting their power? Well, I think it can practically be demonic, but they decide what values to implant on others. So it's like they program code. They're programming people. They conquer nature, but in a way they become slaves to their raw appetites. And then the real world echoes. Think about modern parallels like big tech, governments using AI for surveillance, ideologues pushing social engineering. The whole global warming thing is a scam. It's rules for thee and not for me. All of this incredible piracy that's going on all around America, where they're stealing hundreds of billions of dollars from American taxpayers, all on the lie that they're taking care of kids and old people and doing what's right for people. And it's like, it's insane. Like, if you just step back, if you get in the devil's chair, at least if you understand what he wants, you can go, oh, he's got his fingers all over this. This is becoming very Luciferian. So the conditioned are the manipulated masses. Everyday people turned into passive artifacts is the word that Lewis used, like raw material molded by the conditioners. They lose their chests, which is their moral instincts, their virtues, like bravery or even compassion. Like you say to people, how do they look at something and I look at it and they don't feel compelled to protect the real victims, the real weak, the real citizens, the real, the real good guys, the real sheep. And they're out in left field. And so then you also have, how it happens through the debunking of emotions as just feelings, right? They're just feelings. Education becomes propaganda, not virtue building. Education was to build virtue in the children and in the young men and women so that they could become virtuous citizens. No, I mean, come on, that's not happening. People, they calculate benefits but can't defend ideals, okay? Language models. It's language models. They will die for language models. They don't even have real root feelings or compassions, right? And then everything's negotiable, including dignity, right? And so you can buy people off, and they lose their barometer of right and wrong. The outcome is no real freedom. They're shaped by fear, pleasures, or advertisements. A quote from Lewis: "We make men without chests and expect of them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst." Seriously, man. What a brilliant cat he was. And then this, again, real world echoes. Modern examples include echo chambers on social media, consumerism numbing values, societies accepting surveillance for safety, leading to clever but cowardly people ruled from above. How do you explain the food pyramid being upside down for the last 50 years? The whole time I've been alive, the food pyramid was constructed by food companies and the medical establishment and pharmaceutical companies that really was not what was best for humans to eat. Seed oils, lots of grains, grain rich, a lot of inflammation, a lot of problems. And it's like, wow. And so an example for listening to RFK Jr., he was talking about vaccines. He said, yeah, vaccines are $1 billion business, but pharmaceuticals, trillions of dollars, right? It's $1 trillion business. So you really don't make a ton of money giving folks vaccines. You do. But if the vaccines give people issues that they have to take pharmaceuticals for, whether it's over the counter or a prescription, and you say, oh, Mel, that sounds crazy. It does sound crazy, but it happened. It's real. And so the food we've eaten has given us inflammation and issues and sicknesses. It's exactly the opposite of what we needed. So, but the good news is the very people that own the food companies have the remedy. They sell you the disease and they sell you the remedy. And so does that not sound like the conditioners and the conditioned? Could that not explain some of what we're dealing with? And every commercial on the freaking TV is a drug commercial, with all kind of, well, if you take this, your butt will fall off. It's just like, my gosh, I would never want to take something with 873 potential butt falls off. But anyway, let's listen to the next. Now, this is switching more to Prager University, and I think this is a great conversation you'll enjoy.
And that's Lewis's point, that Tao is all of humanity for millennia affirmed the existence of these principles, these rules, as part of just the furniture of the universe. And only today are we saying, no, we're debunking that. We don't believe those things exist anymore.
So debunking is a huge target for Lewis here. And he uses that word. Yeah. It's funny because now that word is everywhere. It's the left debunking the right. But it's also the right debunking the left. And we all just want to debunk. And I'm sure I've been guilty of debunking a little in my life too. But I find it unsatisfying. Just instinctively, I find debunking unsatisfying because it strikes me as akin to demystifying, to just making everything plain and ordinary and scientific and dull and lifeless. And Lewis makes much that same point here, even all the way from the very beginning of the book. He opens up and he says, look, people now, they open up their English composition books, a grammar book. And he says, I have this particular book I'm talking about on my bookshelf, but I won't embarrass the authors. Let's call them Gaius and Titius. And let's say it's called the Green Book. The Green Book says, when you approach a mountain, you would say, the mountain is sublime. But, according to the genius scholars of the 1940s, that's just an illusion. The mountain is not really sublime. your perception of the mountain is sublime. Your feeling about the mountain is sublime. So really, when you describe something as beautiful or sublime or awesome or terrifying, you can't make any objectively true comment about something outside of you. You're just kind of describing your own feelings, man. And C.S. Lewis says that is a fatal error.
We think we're making a comment about something out there, but really we're only making a comment about our own feelings. We think we're saying something very important about something when it's actually just describing our emotions about it. But Lewis says, no, for all of history, people believed that objective value, beauty, truth, and goodness existed in the universe. And as rational creatures, our job was to recognize that and, in fact, conform our emotions to it. Like he said that Aristotle thought we should be trained from birth almost to love the good and to abhor the bad. That was part of what it meant to be human.
Wow. So isn't that fascinating? They once again, I just see Luciferianism all over this. The conditioner is trying to get the conditioned to basically don't attribute the beauty of nature to God, your creator. Don't attribute your rights to come from the creator. So if you want to displace God, the first thing you've got to do to displace man is displace God, so that man can rule man, right? So if you displace God and you say there is no God, then you start picking on the human mind. So the conditioner is telling the condition, the Mona Lisa is not beautiful. That's just a feeling you have. The Mona Lisa in and of itself is paint on a canvas and these feelings that you stir. And so if you start teaching people that when they're early, you start conditioning people that way, then you can take the joy out of nature. You can take the joy out of the relationship with God. You can take the awe out of the salvation of man, right? And wouldn't that be what at least, look, Lucifer's going to lose this war. He's going to get his butt. His butt was kicked when Jesus died and was resurrected. But he's going to lose again. And in the end, he's going to get put in hell and forever. And so fascinating about that, though, is that the beauty, the order, the law, the creator, and us being able to have all of the creator and to be able to enjoy being created and to be able to, worship God and to be able to say, okay, God is sovereign. So everything that God's doing shouldn't be questioned, even if I don't understand it. All of these things, if you look at what C.S. Lewis is saying, he's really getting into the abolition of man. It also is the abolition of any relationship whatsoever or all or worship of God. Isn't that fascinating? And so they keep going. So this is Neil Shenvi who's doing this for PragerU. The whole it's a video that they do, he and another gentleman, and they go on and on for like 30 minutes. So I tried to cherry pick it, but this will wrap up this segment. But here we'll check this out.
Well, he wouldn't. So he keeps saying, I'm not anti-science because people are going to read me as anti-science. I'm not anti-science. What he's anti is the idea that the human will takes precedence over reality. So he has a great quote explaining what his criticism is. The cardinal problem was how to conform the soul to reality, and the solution was knowledge, self-discipline, and virtue. To applied science and magic alike, the problem is how to subdue reality to the will of man, and the solution is a technique. In other words, in the past, you'd say, here's some problem that I have. How can I shape my own views, how can I shape my own character to either confront this problem, to accept it, to change what I can, to accept what I can't, something like that. It's an internal, inward focus. But to science and magic, the solution is either wave this wand or press this button.
Right. Problem
solved. Fix reality. Don't fix yourself. Now, sometimes that's great. If you have a disease, you want it cured.
Yeah.
Other times you're like, well, I'm not sure why I'm depressed. I'll just take this pill. Let's look inside. Maybe I'm not viewing reality properly. But to us, we instantly look for that button to press to solve our problems. And he's criticizing that. I would argue that what we're looking at today in large swaths of our culture, in the woke movement, is actually what he would call a new ideology.
Yeah.
The idea, and so he talks about how new ideologies are really just one fragment of the Tao, ripped from its context in the whole, and swollen to madness in its isolation. So you take one principle that's true, then it becomes the only principle.
When Lewis wrote that, it immediately made me think of another British philosopher, Michael Oakeshott, who in Rationalism and Politics, he says, this definition of ideology so stuck with me that I memorized it. It says that ideology is the formalized abridgment of the supposed substratum of rational truth contained in the tradition. And it struck me when I reread Abolition of Man because that's exactly the definition.
Yeah, the abridgment. That's the key, is that you take one true piece, but then it becomes the only piece, and everything that's oriented around that. So for Lewis, actually what he was worried about in a lot of his novels was the idea that the preservation of the human race became the only good. And everything else, whether love for your parents, love for your children, justice, mercy, all those other things became subservient to preserving the human race.
Yeah.
But I think today we have one of those ideologies that Lewis didn't foresee, which is, again, this critical theory stuff. And the one principle is protecting the vulnerable. That becomes the only virtue, keeping people safe from oppressors and overthrowing oppression. That's the only virtue. Everything else gets thrown out.
Isn't that interesting? Do you agree? Do you agree with what they're saying? Because it's, look, one of the nice things is, it's not always wrong to disagree, right? It's very healthy. It's not always wrong to be in a room in business and, there's a time to really flesh it out. In fact, one of the best practices that you might try this year in business that does kind of go along with taking on heady subjects like this is make people get on both sides of the issue. Even if it's your idea, you say, hey, I have a great idea. Let's open a new business in Laurel, Mississippi. All right. Let's talk through that. Everybody give me 3 solid supporting reasons for why we should do that. And everybody give me 3 solid reasons for why we shouldn't, including the person who came up with the idea. Get on both sides of the equation and let's talk through it. So antithesis, talking through it, challenging, being the devil's advocate. These are ways not to make a bad decision. But at some point, a decision's made. And in what we're talking about with C.S. Lewis is there is right and there is wrong. And so I don't know. I mean, I agree with what he's saying there is that they're picking out one truth and they're throwing out all other truths and they're making everybody live by it. And they're like, well, you're an ist, you're a this, you're a that, and they attack. And in the totality of things, they're completely and utterly wrong. And so we'll wrap that section up. I'll close it with this. So C.S. Lewis defines the Tao broadly as the doctrine of objective value, the belief that certain attitudes are really true and others really false, to the kind of thing the universe is and the kind of things we are. Okay? So objective right and wrong, basically. And you can see where the elements of the conditioners, the elites, the power-hungry people in the world that have done some really treacherous things over time, and they're doing treacherous things right now. I think you should really maybe it's not a hard read, but you're reading something written in 1943, right? And so I've read through it over the holidays, and I found it fascinating. You have to go back and read a few paragraphs 2 or 3 times sometimes, but it's really good. It's a great read. And see what you think about the conditioners and the conditioned and the Green Book versus the Tao, and how important it is for us to be men with chests and not get pushed around by these wackos. And so I want to switch to a couple of current events, and then we'll roll out today, but I think this is quite fascinating. So this is a survivor of the Maduro regime. She came to America, and she's very passionate. And with everything that went on in Venezuela, which I'll talk about briefly after this to make sure we don't lose what's going on. Last podcast we talked about the Promethean project, and we talked about Ms. Kokenda. And man alive, were we all over that. And it's not done. So I'll try to put an umbrella over this so you don't lose sight of what's really going on right now, because the news media and the news cycle, there are a lot of conditioners in that, and they're expecting us to be conditioned. They're expecting us to be tricked. You know what I mean? And we don't want to do that on the Mel Blackwell Experience. But listen to her. It's very passionate, and I don't see how you can listen to this and not be moved.
An American that hasn't lived the terror of socialism will never understand what is going on right now. I don't care if you have a master's degree in whatever. unless you live it in your own skin. You won't ever understand it. And I think it's terribly disrespectful for anybody to tell Venezuela how we should react to that. I think it's terribly disrespectful to the people that have died, saying that Maduro shouldn't be where he is. And I left my country with just the clothes I was wearing and a little bit of diapers and milk that I had left. Don't you dare telling me that this is not a reason for celebration. When I first come into the United States, I cried and had to turn around to my husband and ask him to please help me to open the shower because I didn't even know how to open the shower. When I walked into Walmart and I saw so many options to eat, I couldn't believe myself. Our reality is different. We want to live. And you guys have everything in this country, more than you could ever imagine. And I just wish that you could love it a little bit more and respect it a little bit more. Because if I had to give my life for America, I would.
Wow. See what I mean? I mean, it's important that we are able to see who are the good guys, who are the bad guys. And if you talk long enough to a really, really intelligent person who's lost bearings on that, they'll tie you up. What is good? What is bad? Why are you right? Why are you wrong? Why is your God? Why not my God? Who are you to say? Well, what if I don't agree? Well, what about this? And it's a very complex conversation to have. And the truth is there's good guys and bad guys. I mean, these people over in Venezuela, they were promised prosperity by elected communists, and they got oppressed and beat down, and they were ruled by a turd. And I want to bring this back around. So you have to understand what is Venezuela. Venezuela was part of the drug cartel network, part of the destruction of the U.S. dollar, part of what Russia and China were trying to do with BRICS, okay, to try to devalue the dollar on the global stage. And if you think we're in a bad place right now, and most Americans don't even have a clue, but, you know, the oil being based on a dollar, the U.S. dollar, and that being the basis for all oil transactions is a do or die thing for America. The United States of America would not have any real teeth on the global stage if we lose the U.S. dollar as the basis for petrol, basically, the petrol dollar. And so you have China, you have Russia, you have Iran. Okay, those are not our friends, okay? And none of this Russia stuff and the war in Ukraine and all that hogwash, okay? What I'm talking about is something that really threatens America in our hemisphere. And so there was a movement with Biden and that administration that the dollar was going to be dethroned. And, you know, when Trump goes down there and takes out Maduro, and he did it under a law enforcement because we have warrants for his arrest. So we basically went in and arrested him. If you read the facts, and there could be some propaganda around it, who knows, right? But it seems to be that we went in there and utilized some technology that the world, the non-covert world had not seen before, and it was pretty amazing. So we went in there, we utilized some type of audible technology that brought people to their knees. Their ears were ringing, their eyes and their nose were bleeding, they were throwing up blood, and that audible just makes them, you know, it just knocks them down basically, and until we stop it, they can't get up. We go in there shooting guns, they're shooting at a pace. With just technology that nobody else has. We get in, we get out, and off we go. So all that's important because we flexed our muscle, and that's always good to see that your side is the strongest. But having said all that, what we're really doing is we're taking on the drug cartels that are affiliated with the old European model of ruling the world through the Bank of London. And if you remember Susan Kakinda and the Promethean Action, you know, we talked about that, and then lo and behold, within 2 weeks, bam, you can see Trump taking action, and he's not finished. And so he's continuing to square off against the UN, the EU, the true enemies of ours, which are Russia and China and Iran, and he is destabilizing them, and he's stabilizing us. And so what he's saying in Venezuela is that, yeah, American oil companies are going to have to go in there and rebuild the infrastructure because Turd Maduro just basically was able to get enough oil out of the ground and dilapidate the equipment and not maintain it, no preventative maintenance. So that equipment's been able to make him rich, but it's not enough to sustain what that country deserves. They're sitting on, you know, the largest oil supply. Now, what I've read is it's not as sweet a crude as what we have here, but it doesn't matter. It can be, it can be cleaned up, right? And so it's a great opportunity for American companies to go down there and rebuild those oil wells. Trump's not stupid. He's not going to go make another country rich and turn it back over to a turd. He's going to pull some of the wealth out of that country towards America. And most importantly, anybody. So he's going to sell oil to the Chinese. He absolutely is, in the U.S. dollar. And he's going to sell it to whoever based on the U.S. dollar. So he just undid BRICS, which was very scary. Like nobody's paying any attention to that giant zombie apocalypse that was coming, and Trump just ended it. And so he's got that. So he's got the drug cartels. That was their money laundering scheme. They were taking trillions of dollars through Venezuela. They were destabilizing America. They were going to upend the petrodollar. And then you've got the Bank of London that's playing games. And you know who it really shot a missile across the bow is Canada. So now, the government of Canada has been no friend to America, make America great again. Not at all. So I'm not going to go into great detail today because it's happening. But, in this whole conversation with Greenland, he's not playing. And people are like, everybody wants to argue. It goes back to C.S. Lewis. There's right and wrong. There's going to be a day of reckoning. I like to say, and I say it in my book on common sense, I say it to the young people at the end, live your life like you're always going to have quite a few days of reckonings, because you're going to have these days where you pay the piper and you're sitting down and you're assessing what you've done, and you're going to say, wow, I'm glad I did. Or you're going to say, man, I wish I would have. And we're not running our country like that anymore. Trump is. But you've got to do things. I'm glad we did that. But we're always freezing up with that hecklers all around, these conditioners all around that are getting the useful idiots to freeze up and ask all the wrong questions. And the window of opportunity closes. We cannot have Russia and China. We cannot have those people setting up bases in Greenland and controlling, the Arctic. You can't. Right there, off of America. So Trump is shoring up the sovereignty of America. He's trying to build wealth for the citizens of America so that the wealth comes back to American citizens. He's trying to stabilize the petrodollar. He's trying to stop the drug cartels in the Bank of London from manipulating our big mega industries through elites with farming, with beef, with, pharmaceuticals, with food, all of it, medical. He's taken on the insurance companies. I mean, these are fabulous. These are fascinating things. And he's putting a bullseye on drug cartels in around our hemisphere. So if you want to run a drug cartel in Mexico and take over the Mexican government, I would say, okay, that's a glad I did, I wish I would moment. And Trump is stepping up, and I applaud him for it. And so I hope that is helpful on just kind of closing the loop on kind of what it is that we've been watching happen and then seeing it happen. And then I want to talk about this for just a minute. This is really, really interesting. So last subject we're going to take on today is this subject of Somali fraud. And it's not just Somalians, guys. Come on. It's amazing that you challenge law and order by flooding the country with millions and millions and millions of third world people who are coming in, and they say, well, they're not going to be on welfare. They're on welfare. They're not going to be able to bleed the American dole. They're bleeding the American dole. Well, they're not going to have free housing. Yeah, they have free housing. Well, they're not going to get free health care. Yeah, they are. They're getting free health care eventually through Medicaid. Well, they're going to be productive citizens. I mean, they just deserve a chance. They've had a bad go of it. Okay. The entire Somali community is in Minnesota looks like a bunch of pirates. It's unbelievable. So let's say you and I live next to each other. I can take care of your 3 kids and you can take care of my 3 kids. Okay. But we're really not. We're just saying that we are, and we can bill through the cities in Minnesota, the state of Minnesota, access federal dollars that the city and the state are supposed to be good stewards of. And you and I are just fleecing the taxpayer. I make $200,000 a year. You make $200,000 a year. We're really not running daycares. It's our house. Nobody's checking. And you don't have rampant fraud if you have a government that's trying to vet and make sure they don't. So where do they defraud us? Do they vote? Yeah. Illegals vote. No, they don't. Yes, they do. They vote. Illegals steal monies from Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, child care, elderly care, healthcare transportation. They have found all of these areas that they can just run a piracy scheme. Okay. That's wrong, y'all. Come on now. We're working hard. I work real hard to make X $100,000 a year, and you got these guys sitting up there driving around just fleecing us blind, and the government is in on it. And so this is John Solomon who's talking about something that I think is very important. Now, listen to what he says, and then we'll talk about it for a minute.
It was literally a foreign ATM taking cash out of the United States to foreign destinations, and we don't know the reason why. But that is now under investigation by the FBI and HSI. And people say, well, is this normal? I mean, maybe this goes on at every airport. We got comparative statistics yesterday. The amount of money that these Somali couriers took out of the Minneapolis airport with the TSA flagging it daily was 99 times larger than all the cash that was declared in luggage going out of New York's JFK International Airport, one of the busiest international airports in America. 99 times more than what flies out of Dallas. 90% more. 90% more than what was flown out of Seattle, which is the most common airport for people to go to Asia from. This was an abnormally high amount of cash being stuffed in the luggage, being detected every day by the TSA. Because, by the way, the couriers they declared the money. They literally would say, "Yeah, we got $1 million in our suitcase," which you have to do to get it through the airport. And nobody in the Biden administration thought it was unusual that $1 million of cash was moving in luggage out of the country, out of Minneapolis every day, way more than any other airport in America at the time. This is, I think, the second end of this welfare scam, which is where was this money going after it was defrauded?
Wow. Look, that's not okay, y'all. We can't be a country. Your business will not survive if you allow a consortium of those in authority to set up schemes so that folks within your company can rob it blind. And also what I read in this is people would set these Somali businesses up with these huge lump sum payments, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. And then they would leave the state government in Minnesota and go to work for the business that they granted all that money to. So it's just a total scam, and it has to stop, you know? And so last thing we're going to talk about today is I like Brandon Gill. He is Dinesh D'Souza's son-in-law. So he married Dinesh's daughter, and her name escapes me, but when he gets going, he is an exceedingly good prosecutor in the Congress where he's actually talking to these people. These people don't have the facts. They don't care. If I'm robbing you blind and I have such a disdain for you that I don't even want to answer your questions, that's what we're dealing with here, okay? So I want you to think conditioner. I want you to think conditioned. And I want you to think about that thief on that cross that had a moment where he comes to his senses and looks over at Jesus and says, this guy's done nothing. You know, he's innocent. And Jesus says, today you will join me in paradise. And he gets to heaven. Everybody's like, how'd you get here? And he says, well, the guy on the middle cross told me I could come. And it's like, so how are you being your best self? How can you have a country that your children and your neighbors' children and legal immigrants' children and those of us that are citizens that are living up to and rightful heirs to the wealth and treasure of our country, our America. How can you even have that if you let these people just rob you blind and spit in your face when you ask them about it? But check out Brandon Gill. He gets after this cat.
73%. Do you know what that number is for Minnesota native households?
Again, you're using the phrase Minnesota native households, but the majority...
The number is 18%. That's quite an astounding difference. I think we would agree.
Can I answer the question, please?
Let me ask you one more, and then we can go on to that. What percentage of Somali-headed households are on welfare in general?
I don't know.
It's 81%. What about... let me just ask you, after 10 years of being in the United States, what percentage of Somali immigrant households continue to be on welfare?
I don't know.
The number is 78%. So even after 10 years, 78% of Somali immigrant households continue to be on welfare. Do you know what that number is for native Minnesota-headed households?
Again, you're using
non-Somali immigrant-headed households.
If I can just answer the question, when you're using the phrase native Minnesotans, the majority of Somali Minnesotans are as Minnesotan as any of us. They were born in the United States. It's only 8,000 of the 108,000 Somalis.
And nevertheless, the welfare usage is astoundingly different. Let me ask you again, does that make Minnesota stronger or weaker?
Again, I'd like the opportunity to answer the question here.
Go for it.
Again, the majority of Somali Minnesotans are born in the United States, as I understand it.
Okay, well, what percentage of working-age Somalians who have been in the U.S. for 10 years or more, how many of them speak English very well?
I don't know.
About half. The answer is about half. That seems pretty low, doesn't it?
Again, I keep trying to...
It doesn't sound like something that makes our country stronger to me, and I think most Americans would agree with me on that. I need to move on. Ms. Robbins, when would you say we concretely knew that widespread welfare fraud was occurring in Minnesota?
There have been reports since 2009 from the Office of Legislative Auditor. I would say the credible reports on child care fraud started surfacing 2011 to 2013.
So for over a decade?
Yes, sir.
When do you think Governor Walz knew about this fraud?
From the very beginning. He was running for governor in 2018 when there were prosecutions going on, when there was an OLA report, active cases in the news all the time.
And what was the Walz administration's response?
They actually did nothing when they got into office, and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan had been on the committee in the legislature that had hearings on child care fraud, and when they got into office, they did put $5 million into a little more money, but nothing changed.
But nothing. And let me ask you, Mr. Hudson, thank you for being here. Did those who commit this fraud, do they typically vote for Republicans or Democrats, in your opinion?
In my opinion, thank you for qualifying like that, I would say they most definitely overwhelmingly vote for Democrats.
Do they typically donate to Republicans or Democrats?
Not to my knowledge. They
don't
donate to Republicans, they donate to Democrats, in my opinion, yes.
Got it. So would you say this is the Somali population is an important demographic for Democrats to win over politically?
Unquestionably.
Got it. And do you think it would have hurt Democrats' political standing with the Somali population to investigate this fraud?
Very clearly.
Got it. So in other words, you're saying that there was a political incentive to cover up widespread Somali fraud. Is that right?
100.
Wow. Okay. Sorry, that was a little sloppy. So you get the point, right? The point is it wasn't funny when he's like, well, wait, hold on a second now. So who are we calling, Somali citizens? And so the facts are they latch onto these one truths and they stonewall you and Representative Gill is able to just go right at it. He does a great job. But last thing I'll talk about is this ICE shooting in Minnesota. I mean, they're looking for the summer of love. They're looking for the George Floyd 2.0. It's right on cue for what they did in Trump's first term. They're going to create havoc all through 2026 leading into the midterms in hopes of trying to win the House so that they can impeach Trump and slow him down. All this is about is stopping you and me from having a sovereign nation where we can do what's best for Americans. And look, the good thing about America is when America is strong, when America's citizens are strong, when we have a strong manufacturing base, when we have a strong Judeo-Christian country, when Americans are allowed to live in affordable homes with good jobs and good money, and when we're offered integrity, we take integrity. We've got a whole subculture of this country now that lives on the dole. Not only do they live on the dole, they rob us and fleece us blind. They hate us. They have absolutely no business being here. And it really is one of those moments where you have to decide, I'm glad I did or I wish I would have. If you look at Europe, they're real close to tipping. They may not come out of this because they've got these men with no chests and these women with no chests that are running that country. And I don't think that they're just weak. I think they're complicit. I don't think you have fraud in Minneapolis because of a bunch of pirates that figured it all out. I think you have it because of a bunch of pirates that figured it all out with the help of a bunch of inside Americans who are fleecing and robbing this country blind. And that's just how I feel. And so I hope this has been interesting. I want to go out today with Bob Nelson on his football team. He did this back, I believe it was on Rodney Dangerfield's show a while back, but we'll go out with that.
And now, let's meet the players of the College All-Star Game. Billy Bob Brubeck, University of Texas. Right guard. Tom. Robert W. Wilson, Harvard University, quarterback. Hi, Muffy. Number 72. Oh, shit, 27. Tony Cappuccino, Brooklyn University, and, oh, fuck. Bruce Kuskiaski, San Francisco University, tight end. Really. Next year, I hope to be a wide receiver.
I'm sure you will be.
Hello. Football in my life. I love football. You see me playing football on the football field with a football. But when I play football, I'll make sure that I always wear protective gear, such as my helmet and them shoulder pads. Don't ever go on the field without these things on, because you could get seriously killed. I myself, when I was a little children, I was playing football with my friends, and my head would accidentally rip from my body. No, and my head was laying in the mud, and my body would run around tackling shit like that. Finally, one of my friends put my head back on my body, and the doctor said that I had Dane damage. But my friends don't know what the fuck that shit is. Anyway, the most important piece of equipment is called the cup. Now, it ain't no Dixie cup, and it ain't no coffee mug. And you certainly won't want to be drinking nothing out of it. It's a piece of Cubsware that goes right there, and then you can't get hurt. Look. There ain't no way you can get hurt when you're wearing your cup. Now, I ain't got my cup on. And I can't see shit right now.
I should have given everybody a language warning. That's funny, man. Go on YouTube and watch him. He's hilarious. There's actually a little segment of that before that too. But, well, look, I hope you guys have enjoyed the Mel Blackwell Experience this week. And remember, it's the middleman on the cross that lets us in. Do your best work this year. Until next week. Cheers.